All right, next up, let's go ahead and dive into some somber news, unfortunately, for most of us fight fans. Looks like Dustin Poirier is not going to be fighting Tony Ferguson as originally thought at UFC 254 in October due to contract issues. Poirier has said from the start that he's a prize fighter, and if the prize is right, he'll go out there and fight Tony easily. Apparently, he's telling ESPN in a new report that just came out today that they couldn't come to terms, that Poirier and UFC couldn't come to terms with that. Now, if you look at Poirier's purse history, he got 150K to show and win against Dan Hooker, his most recent fight that he headlined in an all-out war that was, will go down as a classic fight. I mean, that was an amazing fight. And if you look at Poirier's past several fights, I mean, the dude rarely has a bad fight. I would say Nurmagomedov is his worst showing out of his last 4 or 5 fights, and that's not taking anything away against Dustin Poirier because it's Khabib Nurmagomedov, and that's what he does. I mean, he just goes out there and mauls you. He can make the most exciting fighters look bad, and in fact, we may see that happen in the upcoming title fight at UFC 254 when Nurmagomedov fights Justin Gaethje. It might be, Gaethje just looks helpless out there. It's what Khabib does, but that aside, Poirier has put on some of the best fights, most entertaining fights that one can imagine a fighter has, put on. In recent memory, the only person I can really compare him to is Gaethje, actually, in terms of just the all-out excitement of the rest of his fights. I mean, his fight against Dan Hooker, his fight against Gaethje, his fight against Max Holloway, his fight against Eddie Alvarez the second time, first time as well, though that ended in controversy, but, second time against Alvarez looking amazing. Anthony Pettis, the dude puts on fight of the night performance makers consistently. And he's saying, I need to get paid my worth in order to go and take a dangerous fight against Tony Ferguson, which is completely understandable because Ferguson is a monster. Up until losing to Gaethje recently, he had been on a crazy, win streak and had really bloodied some guys up. And even Gaethje took damage in that fight. I mean, it's not like Gaethje came out unscathed. It was a good back and forth. That's a rough fight for anybody to take. And Poirier is basically saying, you know what, I'll do it, but you gotta pay me my worth. And the hard part for him is that, this is just a promotional stance. This is what they do. This is what they do with Jon Jones. This is what they did with Jorge Masvidal. And they apparently came to some terms, right? Eventually got Masvidal back in the octagon. But before he got that title shot, when issues happened and, when Burns got removed because of COVID, I mean, Masvidal was complaining, saying the same type of thing. Like, hey, you got to pay me what I'm worth. And Poirier is not, I don't want to say he's not in title contention, because if he got a title shot again, in 6 months, or if he was a late notice replacement, if a fight fell out, I mean, nobody would be shocked that Poirier would get another crack at the belt, right? I mean, he's looked pretty phenomenal outside of anyone not named Khabib Nurmagomedov. So he's not out of the title picture, but realistically, he probably needs at least one more win to get another crack at the belt through merit. And Ferguson would certainly, bump him up probably to near top of the line there in terms of getting another crack against Khabib. But there's no incentive on the UFC side to say, oh, yeah, we're going to give you more money for a Ferguson fight, when historically Poirier hasn't drawn or been a huge needle mover, right? He is beloved by hardcore fans, rightfully so. He puts on amazing, exciting fights, but it's similar to Gaethje. I mean, Gaethje's best pay-per-view or pay-per-view and or just viewing audience in general came against Tony Ferguson when it was the first event back in the middle of a pandemic. There were not a lot of sports on. There's definitely a COVID boost there. There's a COVID boost because sports had been shut down for a while. Nothing had been on. And all of a sudden you have a pretty stacked card in UFC 249, and pay-per-view numbers for that I believe we're trending in the 800,000 range or so, which is massive for both Gaethje and Ferguson. Because historically, Gaethje and Ferguson both didn't really bring in viewers. I mean, Ferguson brought in around 200,000 when he fought Kevin Lee, which is the only other time he main evented a pay-per-view. And Gaethje hadn't main evented a pay-per-view, but had main evented some ESPN cards, and the viewership was not, the highest ESPN had ever seen. It's, kind of middling or lower, on the lower end. So, and just look again at Masvidal in terms of, he's selling 1.3 million worldwide. That's still a good 500,000 more than Gaethje versus Ferguson apparently sold. So Gaethje is not this huge needle mover, despite being one of the most entertaining fighters to watch. And that is something the hardcore fans sometimes really forget, is that, you can go out there and be a killer. You can go out there and look phenomenal. Right, Israel Adesanya up until the OL Rim Arrow fight, which yes, we won't go down there. Everybody gets one, but up until then had looked like a killer. Right, had just been gone out there, just made everybody look kind of foolish. Had that fight with Anderson Silva, just dominated Robert Whittaker, but he wasn't really moving the needle in a outside of UFC hardcore fan way. Right, everyone was so hyped on him. Everyone's like, he's amazing, undefeated. And he still has that hype, but he's also not bringing in 500, 600, 700,000 pay-per-views. Whittaker versus Adesanya did not, hit those numbers. They simply didn't. And he's not, some huge crossover star. Is he big in New Zealand and Oceania and Australia? Yeah, of course. Of course. He's growing there, just like Robert Whittaker was big there. I mean, Adesanya is obviously more popular, I would say, in that region, but at least at the moment. But I mean, it's not to the same level that, say, a Masvidal or a Jon Jones or a McGregor, obviously, is at, or Khabib even, right? It's just not that same transcendence. So yes, Poirier is a super exciting fighter. He's put on amazing fights, but to the promotion, he's not bringing in an extra 300,000-400,000 pay-per-view buys. He's not. And if you're not doing that, the promotion just isn't going to give you the pay that you probably want, regardless of how good you look. Right? I mean, it is what it is. It's crappy for the fighters for sure, but that's how the promotion has always worked. And Poirier is one of the most, in terms of getting 150K, that is not bad at all. It's good stuff. And I'm not saying he doesn't deserve more from a fighter, MRP standpoint. You can check my record on that. Fighters definitely deserve a bigger share, and Poirier definitely has every right in the world to go out there and say, I deserve more money. But he doesn't have the leverage, is what it comes down to. He simply doesn't. It's he's not bringing in all these extra pay-per-view buys. He's not getting that cross promotion from the media where, Sports Center's having him on to talk about, his next fight. And, yes, he does the charity work, which I respect and I think is awesome, but it's not like that charity work is getting picked up by mainstream news outlets, even though it probably should. He just doesn't have the leverage where the UFC is going to say, all right, we'll kick you an extra 200 grand for this fight. Or all right, we'll bump you up. We'll renegotiate your contract. Let's go ahead and talk about that. He doesn't have that leverage. It's rare that a fighter gets the opportunity to have some sort of leverage to hold over the UFC to renegotiate. Again, with Masvidal even, who was definitely more of a crossover star, it took Burns falling out of a fight and them needing a last-minute replacement for him to finally get the deal done. So even then, that's probably what it's going to take for Poirier, is he's probably going to have to be waiting in the wings. And if Gaethje pulls out or Khabib pulls out and they need an interim fight, especially since he has a win over Gaethje, then they might ring up Poirier and say, hey, Khabib's out, he's injured. You want to fight for another interim belt? And they might be willing to give him some more money, especially if it's a week or two out. But other than that, fortunately, this cycle of fighters saying they need more money, which is good, that they are recognizing their worth finally, and that they're standing up to the promotion and saying, hey, no, I need more. That it's good that they're aware of that now, rather than, blinders on saying, yeah, the promotion's amazing, paying me everything I'm worth. And it's kind of like, well, the numbers don't necessarily support that. It still unfortunately leaves them with no real leverage in these scenarios. And Poirier is not going to get what he wants. He might sit on the shelf for a while. He might hang back, wait for an opportunity to jump in at a last minute cancellation. But I wouldn't be surprised if he's on the shelf for a while at this point, simply because if he's asking for more money, he's got nothing in terms of negotiational leverage to go against the UFC. So sorry, guys. It sucks. I want to see that fight too, but I don't think it's going to get done for 254 or in the near future for that matter.